Welcome again to the first Global Global Speaker Series of the semester. My name is Richa, and I'm a graduate assistant working with the lovely Dr. Hillary Weaver. We have a link in the chat that will be coming shortly for the feedback form, and we are grateful for your feedback, so make sure you fill that out. And also just a reminder, we are recording this event, so you are aware. So without further delay, let's begin. Today's presentation is aimed to provide insight into the social, political, and economical barriers faced by Indigenous, Maya, Guatemalan, deportees, and returnees from the U.S. and Mexico, including legal barriers to naturalization and citizenship. Joining us today, we have Dr. Gail, who is an assistant professor of human development at Binghamton University and a UB CPI Distinguished Scholar. Dr. Gail has his PhD from the University of California. In 2016, he initiated an ethnographic photodocumentary project in 3 refugee settlement communities in collaboration with his brother, professional photographer Manuel Gil, which involves single portraits of 26 subjects and another with their families. He's won the Best Article Prize by the Latino and Ethnic and Racial Minority section of the American Sociology Association and Latina Studies section. Dr. Gill has over 10 experience of expertise and experience in researching disadvantaged Indigenous Mayan migrants from the Boardwalk. Thank you, Dr. Gill, for joining us today, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you for the lovely introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here. The microphone so that everyone can hear me. So good afternoon and welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to share my research with the Global to Local Legend series. My presentation titled Research with Indigenous Maya Migrant Communities in Mexico and the US, how the local and global intersect, will explore how my personal upbringing and academic training inform my scholarly work. In the meantime, put the PowerPoint on. Fire Richa's assistance. Here we go. Very good. Yep. Oh, Emma. That's one question. Escape from this. Thank you. Appreciate it. So let's begin. So to begin, I will start with some background on my personal upbringing in a migrant household in New York City. I will also provide some background on my educational training, some of my hobbies, and illustrate why these hobbies are so important in the research that I do. Then I will talk about the migrant families that I've worked with in Los Angeles, the study of gender, indigeneity, and culture in the community of La Gloria, a former refugee settlement in the state of Chiapas, Mexico, collaboration to obtain legal status for stateless refugees, and lastly, the unification of Indigenous families separated under zero tolerance, and thereafter, of course, questions and answers. Now, my life experiences shaped my professional interest in conducting research in immigrant communities. Mariachi music, too, inspires my work, but more about this later. Now, at age 4, when my sister Lorena was a newborn, I witnessed an immigration raid in my New York City home. The deportation of family members impacted my household. The incident forced me to grow up quickly and take on caretaking duties. Now, to help my family, I balanced several jobs and committed myself to my studies. My high school English teacher and debate coach, Josh Cabot, seated center, shared information regarding multiple jobs, family obligations, and scholarly accomplishments to a news reporter, the late Karen Avenoso. Now, Karen featured me in a week-long series in the Daily News. Now, as a first-generation student, my public education underprepared me for the academic rigor of Vassar College. I was placed on academic probation and encountered negative assumptions about my abilities based on my race and class. Thanks to supportive mentors, friends, and family, I was able to excel in college, serve as president of El Latino, and collaborated with students in bringing scholars such as Teddy Moraga, poet Lorna de Cervantes, and activist lawyer and filmmaker Yves Morales, former member of the Young World's Party. For my senior thesis titled Chicano Segregation, the intersection of race and sex discrimination and legal sanction in the Southwest, I utilized Dr. Denise Segura's theory of tripartite system stratification to explain how gender, race, and class interconnect to impede Chicana social, economic, and political mobility in the states of California and Texas. Now, after graduation, I took a year to work as a community organizer with the Working Families Party, a mayoral campaign, and a paralegal at a corporate law firm before applying to grad school. Now, during this year, I continued reading several books. The key book I read was Frantz Fanon's Wretched of the Earth, which explores broader questions about how neo-colonial relations persist following the formal end of colonial rule. The book prompted me to further my interest in examining how local inequalities are shaped by both local and global social structures. Now, little did I know that Dr. Denise Segura, the very scholar I cited in my senior college thesis, would later be the chair of the graduate selection committee at UC Santa Barbara. Now, during my time at UC Santa Barbara, I worked with Dr. Denise Segura in her multi-year project titled Enlace y Avance, where I worked with a cadre of Latino juniors and seniors at UCSB and Santa Barbara City College, who served as mentors to families who live in surrounding neighborhoods. The purpose of the study was to demystify what it takes to get to college, providing practical tools to Latino children and families who may be able to envisage higher education as an option. The experience provided me with an appreciation of how mentorship and ethnographic research can be used to empower underserved communities. Now, my humble upbringing in an immigrant household and academic training shaped my research with indigenous Maya who fled Guatemala in the 1980s and now reside in the community of La Gloria in Chiapas, Mexico. La Gloria, represented by the blue circle on the map in the overhead, you see there. And all the little red structures that you see are many settlement camps located along the border of Mexico and Guatemala. Now, I took guitar lessons while in grad school at Santa Barbara City College and voice lessons at a conservatory after my doctorate, which helped me join Mariachi Ruclefman, the oldest collegiate mariachi ensemble in the US. During my postdoctoral training at UCLA, as numerous studies have identified how music can be utilized to address the effects of traumatic exposure to violence, music making became a source of therapy to address a long-term impact caused by an immigration rate that I observed as a child. Now, the musical director of our ensemble is Chuy Guzman, who is also the musical director of the multiple Grammy Award-winning Mariachi Los Canteros. Mariachi Tlatlan is also where I met my partner and wife, Tanya Barajas. Now, music continues to provide creative inspiration for my work. The visual arts, too, informs and inspires my work. Now, the decision to use photography in my research was a strategic attempt to counter the dominant visual representations of migrants who are often rendered visible in photographs as caravan invaders and or anonymous victims. Such depictions inform the ethical grounds used to restrict political membership of migrants to the nation. By fostering collaboration with indigenous Maya and my brother, Manuel, a professional photographer, to pair images with compelling first-hand narratives and visual modes of framing that reflect how they wish to be photographed, I challenge the use of photography as a technology that can make racialized migrant populations visually legible for surveillance by state immigration enforcement bureaucracies. I conducted long-term ethnographic research with indigenous Campobal, Acatec-speaking Maya, who fled the Guatemalan Civil War and settled in La Gloria, the largest refugee settlement, now an ejido with communal use of front rights in the state of Chiapas, Mexico, along with family members who migrated to the United States. Now, during my field work in La Gloria, I learned that many had emigrated to Los Angeles. Now, from 2004 to 2007, I conducted ethnographic fieldwork with several families in the community of Westlake, which is adjacent to downtown Los Angeles. At the heart of Westlake is MacArthur Park, which is a central location where families go to spend downtime with friends and family. At the time, several photographers used flags of the Americas as props that could be captured in photos or for would-be customers who might wish to send their photo to family members abroad. Now, these same flags could also be found throughout the urban landscape. The families I worked with were mixed status households. To prevent the disclosure of their identities that could result in possible deportations, I asked if Manuel and I could take photographs that would not capture their full facial profile, to which they agreed. To establish further rapport, I agreed to provide tutoring for their children on weekends. Now, to foster trust, we agreed to show participants all negatives from photographs taken. If they saw a photo where someone's face was captured, we immediately cut the negative and provided them with the original. All participants also received a copy of all printed photographs. They also provided permission to take photographs of their homes. Now, the high cost of living in Los Angeles prevented all families from having private bedrooms. Unfortunately, many poor working class Latino families live in similar settings in urban and semi-urban centers, which under the global COVID-19 pandemic, as we have all learned, has exacerbated morbidity and mortality rates in the population. We also asked participants if they would be interested in taking photographs using single-use cameras. Now, once again, to prevent disclosure of sensitive information, we asked that they only take photographs of their surroundings and capture images of labor, leisure, religious ceremonies, and anything that they wish to be improved in their community. Now, this photograph taken by Jose illustrates how Westlake lacks sufficient public spaces for its residents. Jose took a photo of MacArthur Park and mentioned enjoying taking his family for walks in this location. In another photo, Andrea identified how there are locations where day laborers gather to seek employment. Andrea also mentioned how the organization Centro de Recursos Centroamericanos, or CARECEN, has created a day laborer program providing a degree of protection for day laborers to gather without fear of intimidation by authorities. In another photo, Andrea photographed her place of work. Andrea, along with most participants, worked in exploitative sweatshop labor. Their salary was determined by the number of pieces they sewed, often pennies per each piece. The factories where they worked lacked much ventilation and often did not have windows. They also disclosed how many of the factories they worked at were owned by Koreans, creating inter-ethnic friction. The exploitability of undocumented migrants is enabled by the enforcement arm of the Immigration Custom Enforcement Agents and Police. In 2006, migrants took to the streets to protest the Sensenbrenner-King bill that would have allowed for draconian immigration measures, such as making it a felony to live in the US without documentation. Despite the risk of possible arrest, Mario and his family decided to participate in the mass protest and capture the image you see here. The photographs taken by participants in Los Angeles illustrate how they are acutely aware of the assets and needs of the community. While they face limited employment options, they are unwilling to allow their legal status to dictate their political participation in the US. Now, international migration of family to the United States has also helped redefine how Indigenous Maya understand indigeneity in Chiapas, Mexico. Now, briefly, to gain permission to conduct research in La Gloria, I presented the aims of my research to the entire community in the Salón de Actos, where community members voted in favor of my research. One of the first participants who approached me following the presentation was Don Franco. Now, Don Franco allowed my brother and I to accompany him to his farm, where I helped him till the lamb. And during our conversation, I learned that in 2003, his daughter, Matilde, migrated to Ohio to join her husband, Alfredo. Their children, Graciela and Pancho, however, remained under the supervision of Don Franco and his wife, Teresa. Matilde and her husband communicated periodically with their children and sent remittances for their care. In 2006, unbeknownst to my brother, he captured Miguel at play with Graciela and Pancho. 10 years later, my brother recognized Graciela, who at this point had been identified as a candidate for the Migueleña princess, who was coronated during a week-long festival celebrating San Miguel, the patron saint of San Miguel Acatan, Guatemala, the homeland of indigenous Maya who now live in La Gloria. Along with sending remittances for the care of her two children, I learned that Matilde also sent money to purchase flowers and candles for church faithful to venerate La Gloria's patron saint during a period of 9 days, known as a novenario, in 2006. The novenario also involves a public procession, where all with candles and flowers at hand, accompanied by fireworks, join in song and prayer from a designated host to the Catholic Church. Matilde's decision to send remittances for this festive occasion begins to illustrate how migrant kin continue to maintain filial connections to kith and kin transnationally. Once we learned that Graciela was a candidate, I conducted participant observation of how community members select the princess. I learned that the month-long voting process requires payment of 1 peso per vote. Community members are allowed to purchase as many votes for their desired candidate. When Graciela was announced a winner, I asked Don Franco if her parents may have contributed most of the money, which he confirmed. Despite community members' claims that the selection of candidates for the Princesa Migueleña is determined by their fluency in indigenous Aztec language and high academic grades, it is an open secret that migrant remittances determine who the candidates and finalists will be. Yes.
Like our political system.
There seems to be an echo, so we are just pausing for a moment.
Just don't use them.
And, oh, you're looking. Yes. Okay, so hopefully we won't hear the echo any longer. So thank you for those who provided the feedback, much appreciated. So let's continue. Thank you again. Now, funds collected from the voting process cover the cost of convivios, which are also sustained by the informal, unpaid labor of local indigenous women who prepare and serve sweet coffee and fresh baked bread. To my surprise, Graciela's family decided to host a convivio in Matilde's newly built home and not in Don Franco's home, where Graciela and her brother lived. The home, made of reinforced concrete, serves as an immediate marker that distinguishes a household's receipt of remittances from migrant kin. The convivio's location provided an opportunity for the family to exhibit their relative class status to the community. Now, the crowning of the Migueleña princess on every September 26th is one of the most significant annual public cultural events that take place during the tonal celebration and serves as a site where race and gender hierarchies are contested in La Gloria. While all damas and caballeros wear traditional traje attire, covert and overt racism toward indigenous Maya, along with changing tastes in dress, compels the younger generation to increasingly opt for Western clothing. Hence, the only people in traditional dress are the direct participants during the ceremony. Now, the ceremony officially starts with a color guard saluting the Mexican flag and singing the national anthem. Thereafter, a marimba band performs son music. One by one, a caballero courts a dama, and each dance parallel to one another, a 1-2 side step toward the front of the stage of the Salon de Actos. Don Matias, the master of ceremonies, who also dons the traditional caballero outfit, introduces each dancer and recounts key historical events that led to the formation of La Gloria. The princess-elect is the last one courted by her caballero. Accompanying them are two young girls who shower both with confetti, symbolizing nature, with flowers, and two boys who carry incense and candle to purify their soul. Once the damas, caballeros, and princess-elect take their seats to the front of the stage, the outgoing princess addresses the audience to express her gratitude for the community's support. She publicly advises the princess-elect, an indigenous architect in Spanish, to uphold the customs and traditions of the people of San Miguel Acatán, Guatemala, and to continue her studies to ensure the development of her community of La Gloria. At the conclusion of her speech, the outgoing princess hands her sash, scepter, crown, and huipil to her caballero. Thereafter, the queen-elect and her caballero approach the front of the stage. Municipal authorities and members of the Green Party extended an invitation to the president of the cabecera and his wife, who coincidentally are also of the Green Party. Both, however, could not make it. And instead, the president sent his brother, while the wife sent for assistance. At the request of Don Matias, these two guests from outside of La Gloria approached the stage to crown Graciela as the new Migueleña princess. Starting in 2000, mestizo outsiders, usually members of the ruling political establishment, have been invited to participate in the coronation of the princess and as a point of ongoing contestation. Don Gaspar, a member of La Gloria's municipio leadership, mentioned how the coordinating committee of the patronal ceremony did not inform all leaders of their decision to extend the invitation to the president and first lady of the cabecera. Don Gaspar stated the following: "It is humiliating and only serves to reinforce the perception that they, mestizos, are powerful. What should be done is find an elder from the community or have the previous princess crown the princess-elect." Now, following the distribution of naturalization documents, which granted La Gloria residents the right to vote, candidates from Mexico's political parties began to campaign in the community, often pledging to improve conditions in La Gloria that often result in empty promises. Consequently, the community is now divided across political party affiliation, and some of La Gloria's leaders entrusted by the community to uphold their autonomy violate this trust and use their power to invite mixed-race mestizo political leaders to participate in the annual coronation ceremony that doubles as an informal endorsement of the policies of their respective party. Therefore, Don Gaspar's comments is more than just a disapproval of a young indigenous woman kneeling in front of mestizos as a public sign of submission. Instead, his comments may be informed by ongoing political clientelism by the state that arguably serves to compromise indigenous autonomy. Now, the aim of this part of my research is to highlight how the selection of the Migueleña princess, identified as part of a long-standing tradition passed down from indigenous ancestors, is actually a hybrid form that is shaped by international migration patterns in the United States, or rather to the United States. Ethnographic observations and photographs illustrate how Matilda's purchase of flowers for the novenario, the selection of candidates for the Migueleña princess, and the election of the princess-elect are all sustained by remittances sent from migrant kin. Yet it also shows how gendered ideas of indigeneity and the relationship between indigenous people and mestizo mixed-race group is contested in La Gloria that have larger implications on how transnational migrants sustain community formation and cultural practices that resist state policies that aim to prevent a place for indigenous lifeways in the nation. Just give me a moment while I get some water. Thank you. Now, one of the ways that the Mexican state has engaged in subordinating indigenous Maya who fled the Guatemalan War has been through the systematic denial of legal status. In 2007, I met Gaspar, who returned to La Gloria from the United States with his 2 children to join his wife, Amalia, who faced deportation in the US. Our meeting haunted me for years to come. In 2012, I approached Gaspar again to ask how I may be able to help. But this time, I alerted him of how his family's experience reminded me of a deportation rate in my childhood home. Now, this disclosure reinforced his trust and soon informed me that his wife and others lacked legal status. We filed a grievance to the Mexican government regarding the prolonged delay in providing naturalization for 39 petitioners in the state of Chiapas, Mexico. Now, one of these petitioners included Antonio. Antonio and his wife did not have legal status. The parents' lack of legal documents barred their 3 children from receiving birth certificates, making them stateless in their country of birth. Similarly, Miguel and his wife's 4 Mexican-born children too are stateless, as entry to Mexico's public education system requires a child's birth certificate. Stateless children are barred from enrolling in school. Barriers to enrolling children in school because of their lack of legal status reflects the ongoing harm inflicted upon Antonio, Miguel, and other families on a day-to-day basis. Photographs of these indigenous Maya document their prolonged conditions of living in a liminal status as citizens of nowhere. These intimate family portraits invite viewers to witness the paradox of stateless subjects having familial ties with Mexican and US-born citizen nationals and being denied legal status in their host country. Now, Mexican officials visited each community and made false promises to streamline the legalization process. As a result, several abandoned the collective grievance. Despite this setback, our petition provided naturalized citizenship for 26 petitioners, who you see here. Yet up to 27,000 who fled the Guatemalan War have not received legal documents. The conferral of citizenship, however, may prove of little consequence for dependents born in the United States. For instance, returning to the family I mentioned earlier, Gaspar and Amalia, parents of Gaspar Jr., now aged 15 in this photograph, informed me that they wish to have their son return to the United States to complete his high school education. Yet, to allow their son to return, the US State Department requires both parents to have legal documentation from the state and prove their filial relationship, or in legal terms, local parentis. Following Amalia's receipt of legal status, I continue to work with them to obtain information from the US State Department to allow their son to travel in the company of a family friend. And here you see him embracing his grandmother, who became very close and found it very difficult to say goodbye to him upon his return to the United States. And his dad also seated to the extreme right of the photograph. We have also continued to document the lives of US citizen minors who experience family separations as they adjust to life in Mexico and eventually return to the United States. In 2016, while conducting fieldwork in Chiapas, Mexico, I met Evelyn and Carlos and their son David. In 1985, David's parents, Carlos and Evelyn, fled Guatemala to escape the violent civil war. Barriers to obtaining legal status limited their employment options in Mexico and compelled Evelyn and Carlos to seek work in the United States. Carlos moved to Alabama in 1998. Evelyn later joined him to work in an apparel sweatshop in 2000. Soon after their reunion, Evelyn gave birth to David in 2003, making him a US citizen. Between 2003 and 2007, immigration enforcement increased across the country, including Alabama. To avoid immigration officials, the parents agreed that it was best for Carlos to remain in the United States and send remittances to Evelyn, who returned to Chiapas with David in 2007. Living in the US without his family proved difficult for Carlos, who returned to Mexico in 2009. Their reunification in Mexico coincided with the start of the Obama presidency. President Obama reinforced policies instituted by his predecessor, George W. Bush, who utilized the events of September 11, 2001, as an opportunity to cast immigrants as criminals and terrorists, enabling passage of the Department of Homeland Security's 2005 Secure Border Initiative, which aimed to improve public safety by identifying, detaining, and removing, quote, dangerous criminal aliens, end quote, from communities. Under President Obama, more than 3.2 million people were deported, impacting as many as 1.6 million children living in the United States. Concurrently, US foreign policy promoted draconian immigration enforcement measures in Mexico, empowering Mexican federal police and military to detain and repatriate unauthorized migrants. Deep-rooted race, gender, and class hierarchies contributed to discrimination against legal residents and indigenous migrants. By 2015, Mexico detained and deported more Central Americans than the United States. Just take another moment, another sip of water. Now, despite working with their parents and others to regularize their Mexican legal status, ongoing economic inequalities in Mexico prevented Carlos and Evelyn from obtaining formal employment. These circumstances motivated David to pursue an education in the United States to someday help his parents. Financial precarity and inaccurate information shaped the family's decision to have David and his father travel to the US-Mexico border so David could be enrolled in a US school. Carlos planned to present his Guatemalan documents along with his son's birth certificate to US border officials. On the morning of November 24, 2017, Carlos and David crossed the border in San Luis Rio Colorado, Sonora. Within 20 minutes, US immigration border officials promptly identified them. Carlos, unsure of David's citizenship, would grant him protection to remain in the country, asked border agents what would be required to obtain lawful entry to allow him to economically support the educational aspirations of his son to the United States. To their surprise, immigration agents placed him in family detention. On the same day, a social worker provided the father a voluntary agreement form that allowed CBP agents to place David in provisional care with the Department of Child Services in Arizona. Carlos faced over 2 months detention and was deported in February 2018. When I later asked Carlos about how he felt about being separated from his son, he explained, quote, "It felt like my son had died." Carlos's trauma unfortunately echoes the experiences of other parents who have undergone forced separation from their children. In a report published by Physicians for Human Rights, researchers studied the psychological effects of family separations experienced by asylum seekers under zero tolerance. The report identifies how the policy involved the process of enforced disappearance, a crime under international law that deprived parents and children of their right to family integrity. In a 2018 conversation with his mother, David confessed how his prolonged stay in the foster care system reinforced the trauma of his family separation. David's trauma manifested in psychosomatic problems. For instance, in a 2019 interview, he confessed how on 2 occasions following a midday nap, he awoke in a state of confusion and wondered where his parents were. David's experience fit the description of night terrors, a type of sleep disorder. A type of sleep disorder in which a person partially awakens from sleep in a state of terror, which has been found to inflict children separated from parents under the zero tolerance policy. Along with night terrors, David mentioned loss of appetite, trouble sleeping, anxiety, and depression, all of which correspond with the effects of family separations experienced by asylum seekers identified in the Physicians for Human Rights study. After a 2-year-long bureaucratic struggle, David was reunited with his family in California. The reunion, however, coincided with the rapid spread of the coronavirus disease, which created newfound difficulties. For instance, as part of a broader international strategy to help mitigate the outbreak, the US barred all non-essential travel across borders. Consequently, David's 2-year-long separation from his family in Mexico was now extended indefinitely under the global pandemic. Now, to conclude, the case of David indicates how family separations along the US-Mexico border by immigration authorities impacts US citizen minors who become orphaned in the foster care system. Now, despite reunification with his family in the United States, David has expressed a strong desire for the close human contact from his parents. While David has exhibited physical and psychological symptoms associated with trauma exposure, it remains unclear how the pandemic, along with David's continued inability to visit and receive affection from his parents, may impact him in the future. Scholars, however, have begun to identify how those with pre-existing physical or psychological needs, quote, may be more vulnerable than others to the psychosocial effects of pandemics, end quote. Therefore, the pandemic may exacerbate the severe pain and suffering committed by US officials under the zero tolerance policy, as identified by the Physicians for Human Rights Support, and have profound long-term implications for David and his parents. Now, to broaden the reach of my collaborative work, in addition to publishing findings in academic journals, my brother and I have exhibited photographs, some of which you've seen here today, nationally and also internationally. By exhibiting our work in these venues and publishing in the US and Latin America press, we can reach audiences in an accessible way who may not have access to academic journals and may help influence public policy. My research aims to have a tangible impact, such as obtaining legal status for participants we work with, identifying how international migration reshapes gender and Indigenous identities, setting a precedent to help others who remain stateless gain legalization, and aiding families separated along the US-Mexico border to reunify with their children, all to advance the human dignity of Indigenous Maya throughout the diaspora. Thank you. I welcome any questions from the folks in this room or those who are joining us virtually. I'll just conclude by also stating that this weekend I had the good fortune of speaking with the parents of David, and we actually moved forward with submitting a petition for humanitarian parole for the father. But you may find this very interesting. When I accessed this website, it was only in the languages of English, Spanish, and Portuguese. As you heard, most of the individuals that I work with, their primary language is Indigenous Akitak. Many of the people who were separated under zero tolerance are Indigenous. And so their fluency is another language that is not available on the website. Lastly, when I was processing their petition, when I was looking for citizenship of the child, the United States was not listed. So, and if I did not select another country other than the United States, I could not proceed with the actual petition. Wow. So, yet again, indicating how these barriers of gaining access to family reunification for this child continue to this day. So once again, thank you. I welcome questions from the audience, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Wow. Wow. I have a question.
Yes.
As you mentioned, there is a strong Indigenous Guatemalan community in diaspora. Did anybody work to connect David with Indigenous Guatemalan people who are here that could support him and give him some sense of family or community while we're waiting to reunify him with his parents?
Right. Well, thank you for your question. As I mentioned, we worked with his family for over 2 years to accomplish family reunification. And the process was very, very difficult. And to be blunt, no, the Department of Child Services in Arizona was very difficult to work with to actually move this process along. They knew that that David had family in Los Angeles and he was requesting for reunification, but in each step, there were bureaucratic obstacles to reunify him with his uncle. So what occurred is that when they tried to contact the uncle, who actually went to visit David pretty soon after the separation, he drove overnight to go see this child and saw him. So it's not as if they did not know that there was this family relationship. What occurred is that when he submitted documents, he was hesitant in disclosing all members of his household.
Right.
Because there may be individuals in his household who may be of mixed status. Now, under the prior administration, it became very clear that any attempt to reunify families among anyone in the said household who wanted to reunify with a child that was separated, they may be liable to investigation across all sectors of the government for possible deportation if they were found to be undocumented. So I believe at this point, because questions like this are very difficult to raise with David's family household in California, that is possibly the reason why some information was not included when he provided, citizenship status or lack of available social security numbers. So then Arizona did not proceed with the reunification, stating lack of documentation or just did not move forward. Then I actually moved forward with trying to foster him with my wife, which is something I didn't talk about. My wife and I went through parenting lessons to try to see if we can actually do this. And we asked the parents and we informed them, listen, this might be a plan B. Because under the current political context that we're living in, it may not be possible for him to reunify with his family members in California. So then we proceeded with that option. But thankfully, this option of reunifying with his family did occur, but it took so long. And I honestly believe it was actually because of the pandemic. I think it was probably coincided exactly when COVID was being announced, that the emergency measures taking place in March, which is actually what happened when he was reunited with his family in March of last year.
I was interested to hear the reciprocity that you employed in your work. One, helping the man till his soil, and secondly, the tutoring you offered in exchange. So how do you label your methodology, whatever? I thought of community-based participatory research, but I don't know that that's it. Could you talk about that a bit?
Sure. Thanks for your question. Yes, absolutely. So I didn't include much of a discussion of my methods, since I wanted to really talk about the different layers of my work and really broaden the discussion for maybe students who are joining us today. So yes, participant action research was part of the work that I did. Participant action research, for those who are not aware, is informed by Freudian methods of, that arises from utilizing the resources and knowledge base of the people that you're actually working with as a resource. So you don't go into communities thinking that they are vacant and not knowledgeable and cannot contribute to the improvement of their communities. And instead we work with that understanding that they are resource rich, right? And my ability to actually till the land with them, I guess, comes back to my upbringing, right? I grew up, doing farm work in Mexico when I was a child with my parents. So I didn't have a problem doing that because, that was a way to, as you put it, show reciprocity and show that I'm not just going to be here and interview you while you're tilling your land and watering your crops. Let me help you carry, some of your crops to the vehicle. So that way, you show, I can be of some use other than just documenting your stories. So now another part of the participatory action research was certainly utilizing the cameras. So folks that have utilized photography individuals who have applied participatory action research found it very helpful in employing this practice with photography and giving cameras to individuals and documenting their circumstances. At the time that I started the research, cell phones weren't as ubiquitous, so we used single-use cameras. But at the same time, individuals that we were working with, we got permission to work with the elder population. During research, we found out that it was actually children doing the work, doing the photographs, so then we had to, get permission to work with children in the high school and work with the high school, which became a very good entry point to, once again, establish trust with an institution that is the schools, children who then became a resource to connect us to their parents. So yes, absolutely, participatory action research is central to this project.
Are there questions in the chat?
There is one question.
Yes.
Okay, no.
We have one question.
Okay, I thought you moved.
I can answer.
read it.
What is the
okay,
question? Yes.
A comment, fantastic project and talk, Oscar, thank you. I'm interested in the interdisciplinary approach, collaborating with your brother Manuel and the use of the photographs. Do you have a theory of how photography functions in your work beyond making the material more accessible, as you mentioned? I'm thinking of theories of the photographic image, such as Susan Sontag's regarding the pain of others, or critiques of mainstream media representations of violence, especially on Black and Indigenous peoples.
Thank you for the question. Yes, excellent question. So now,
From Tommy.
yes, so I am building on scholars that are thinking about a decolonial optics, if you will, of really, once again, connecting, thinking about how photography can be utilized to not make individuals as objects, but instead as active subjects in the research process. So this connects to participant action research. So as indicated just a moment ago, part of the work included giving single-use cameras. And as we proceeded with the project, we constantly thought about how refugees are thought of in the dominant media, even in humanitarian images. Oftentimes it's gender, usually women holding children, women in need. And actually, after reviewing the literature, I found that yes, it's actually a tactic that was employed by multilateral humanitarian agencies, in making this kind of imagery attracted to bring in donor dollars. Erica Baines is an excellent scholar who looks at this topic in regards to looking at gender and visual representation. Now, so that said, we wanted to employ the camera by an outsider, right? Someone not inside the community, and actually engage in a way that kind of pushes back on that dominant practice. In addition to giving cameras, we wanted to actually use the camera to see how we can actually utilize it in a way that's effective on the ground. And to do that, we actually would ask individuals, so we would like to take a camera of how you would like to be represented. And also, oftentimes, as a result, individuals would then extend the invitation to their families, unexpectedly so. And of course, we would reciprocate. And one of the ways that my brother was savvy in the field was that he would actually have a Polaroid available. So he could immediately take the shot, and he utilized it actually strategically so that he can, give it to the individual in situ, and also study it, because he actually used it to figure out, okay, let's think about the lighting and the shadowing. And one of the individuals that really found it really impactful was Antonio, who you saw seated. His wife approached us and immediately took the photograph and framed and put it on her shelf and said, let me put it here. And that to me was to my brother was very touching to see that there was an immediate tangible return. Because unfortunately, the photos that he actually took a lot of time. We could not develop them in the community we were doing research. So oftentimes it would take several months before we would actually return with these images, because they also, it was important for us to give them back. So that's in a way, a little, I hope that answers your question, Tavi. Thank you very much. Any other questions?
First of all, thank you for this wonderful talk, Scott. I was really taken with the kind of multi-layered statelessness that you talked about, and particularly, you know, being in that liminal space where you're neither, well, you're a refugee from your country, and the first place that you went, you have no citizenship, and then the second place, you have no citizenship. And I just wanted to get a little bit of a sense of, like, particularly in Guatemala, what are those policies like? You did talk a lot about Mexico, and of course, the United States, as we know, from the Obama administration to the current, still, you know, broken immigration policies, and particularly regarding family unification. But what are the chances of people even going back to Guatemala, if at all?
Right.
And if not, I was just thinking about other countries like Canada. I'm just trying to think, like, what is happening to the individuals who are caught, right? Like you said, in this statelessness, they have no home, they're in this liminal space. And you have, like you said, because of the legal, you know, machinations, you can't even go to your family because just one person in the house might be a mixed status, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so.
Excellent question, thank you. So, yes, individuals cannot return to Guatemala and expect to get documents from Guatemala.
Right.
Because under the Civil War,
Right.
unfortunately, many of the original documents that attest to their nationality, such as birth certificate, is not available.
Okay.
So that's one way to answer your question, because they have actually tried to get birth certificates from the state, the Guatemalan state, which is necessary to actually start the process to naturalize in Mexico.
Right.
Without that document, unfortunately, they could not move forward, right? Which was actually, information that was provided by many of the participants that I worked with. Now, it's important to highlight that not everyone was born in Guatemala originally, as you noticed. There are these children that they are, as you well put it, in this liminal space, right? They're really citizens of nowhere. They have never received a birth certificate. So that's one of the reasons why it was paramount for us to work with these families, because we later learned, we had no idea actually that this was possible, that children too could be born stateless in Mexico, in the country of birth. Now, the third way to also answer that question is that individuals were very fearful of returning to Guatemala.
Absolutely.
I don't have an image here, but it is a powerful image that my brother took of this individual, Angel. I'll never forget the interview. When we were interviewing Angel, he looks like this very, strong man, and a very, wide. He's wider than I am, and most of the people that we helped, many of them, I will say, had many of the men had migrated to the United States to find work because they just couldn't get any kind of, job in the formal sector in Mexico due to their statelessness, right? But they had returned to Mexico either as a result of the deportation, such as Amalia, who you learned about, right? Or just fear of a possible deportation, such as Evelyn, right, who returned with David. Others were just simply, like Angel, had never migrated. And Angel was unique because when he was seated, I told him, you're strong, you look stronger than these individuals who migrated. Why didn't you go? He said, well, I just, never had money, I never really had the interest. But then I saw, body language is so important. That's the beauty of doing ethnography when you're out there in the field, right? You see someone, you see how they gesture. And he was just holding his leg really tightly and rubbing it, going back and forth. And I was like, you don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but is there anything else that would cause you not to go to the United States to find employment? They said, actually, the reason why I didn't go is because I was fearful. Fearful of being deported to Guatemala.
Right, because then the US takes you, right.
So he was fearful of being returned to Guatemala for the following reason, because several of his family members had been slaughtered. And at age 3, he was running away from the military as they slaughtered family members and were shooting at him. So he basically had been self-medicating to address the trauma of the violence he was exposed to, the violence that resulted in the death of family members. And he had relayed this information to his children. His own kids had told him, Dad, just get over it, you know?
No.
I mean, just, you know, just forget about it. And just that simple interaction is just so powerful to us,
Right.
you know, that he felt more trusting of that relationship, and only thereafter was my brother able to take the photograph, he relaxed a little bit more, you know, after he shared something so deeply moving, right? So that's also what helped in the photographic process, that my
Right.
brother didn't just come to the field and say, hey, I'm here, take a photo of him, please.
Right.
No, he was actually there listening to the narratives, and he was using these narratives as a way to kind of, you know, inform the practice of photography. So that way it wouldn't be necessarily, as Tavi put it, you know, just a simple replication of the pain of others, as Susan Sontag puts it, right?
Thank you so much.
Sure.
We have a hand raised from Dr. Oscar.
Hand raise.
Oh, the dean.
I can't, I can't.
Oh,
Oh, we can't hear him. Oh,
hear me now?
yes.
Okay, good, thank you. What a very informative presentation. So Dr. Gil Garcia, we appreciate your presence today and your research.
Thank you.
Really illuminated us in many ways. I was just wondering, and I realize our time is probably up, or at least time is short. And I was wondering if you could just talk about, if any, how you were able to address, or I guess connect around what these stories were meaning in terms of the trauma that the participants, the respondents, should I say, shared, while at the same time I saw many strengths. I saw courage, I saw resilience, but I also saw and heard from your rendering a great deal of trauma. And I think about the researcher, and I think about you, and I think about your research team in terms of vicarious trauma, and if in fact you experienced any of that, and if so, how were you able to cope? And I believe I heard a little bit about some of the things you did, but I'm not sure if you would translate that into coping mechanisms. So when I talk about vicarious trauma, I'm referring to the fact that as a researcher, you hear these stories of trauma, while at the same time you see resilience. It's still very hard on the researcher, and oftentimes there are feelings and experiences that you endure that you may not be able to express, or if you do, you express it in a way that hopefully helps you get through the research experience successfully.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your comment. I was following you. The audio is a little hard to hear, but I was reading the text as you were speaking. So you were talking about vicarious trauma, and it didn't seem like a question, but please tell me if this is what I get. If I could talk a little bit about how vicarious trauma informs the relationship, the researcher participant relationship.
And also, have you experienced trauma yourself? Like, I know people who do like interviews with victims of rape, right?
I see.
And who have also been a victim of rape, and like, there's a sensory overload, right? Like, so I guess he wants to know also is, did you feel trauma, and was there also vicarious trauma as you were doing this work? Because you're so close and embedded in those
I
communities.
see. No, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dean Alford. Thank you for that excellent question, and that very pointed analysis. Yes, to be blunt, absolutely. When I first met Amalia and her child, I will go back to the image of when they are older now. Let's see if I can return back. I guess I do have the shared screen still. You guys can still see the images.
Yeah.
So I am trying to go back, and I am unable to. But the point here that I want to make is that when I first saw this family, I was moved, and like you put it, yes, there was this moment where the moment of family separation reoccurred, if you will. I did not remember the family separation when I was a child. And it only reoccurred to me once I saw this family who was separated during the course of fieldwork. So yes, there was this experience of lived vicarious trauma that reoccurred, if you will, after we took the initial image many years prior to the one that you're seeing here. We're not sharing this at this moment because it was quite difficult at that moment, and the family kindly requested not to share that image to the public. So we are fulfilling their wish. At that point, Gaspar Jr., who you see here, was an infant, if you will, a child, no more than maybe 3 to 4 years old. And my mind just went back to that moment when I was a child, and immigration agents were in my household handcuffing my family members, and I would see my younger sister face up, just a newborn, on the sofa, and immigration agents were disinclined to actually really make sure that she would be safe.
Right.
So I share this because this certainly impacted my ability to do the work that I wanted to do at that time. And I didn't share that memory to this family at that time because I was still processing it. So only through going through therapy, addressing this in a constructive way, and understanding how that experience shaped my upbringing up to that point, did I have the strength to then go up to this family years later and tell them, listen, what you have gone through, I have some understanding of. It's nowhere comparable to what you've gone through, but I was stronger to share it with them. And they are the actual first people that I shared that information to, not even to family members. I only shared that to these individuals, and I told them that. And I thanked them tremendously because they were very receptive and supportive. And I think that really was a resource for us to move forward in actually moving toward getting legal status for Amalia and several others, which they had never disclosed to me years prior because I continued calling them to see how they are doing, how I can help. But it shows that these experiences, as unfortunate as they may be, that we may experience traumatic experiences in our lives, it can become a resource if you find it that you're able to share these experiences with others who may have some kind of similar experiences, to utilize it as a resource to foster trust, to find a way to give back. And that has always been the aim of the work that I've been doing with my collaborator, my brother, to give back to these communities. And they have certainly also given back to me. And I think that's also important to mention here, that they have helped me really utilize that experience, that traumatic moment, as a resource to help immigrants like the ones that you see here.
Yeah, some folks actually, I've heard some researchers refer to what you just explained, and you explained it so beautifully, refer to that as post-traumatic growth, believe it or not. So it's amazing how we can turn these experiences into something that is meaningful, even as we are somehow working through it ourselves. Nonetheless, it's a process, and it sounds like you were able to take care of yourself. And I just wanted to mention that because as researchers, we're all at risk for vicarious trauma.
Absolutely. Thank you for that excellent question and comment. Yes?
You have multiple notes of expressions of appreciation from people on the chat. There's also another question here from Sarah that says, thank you for the critical work and excellent presentation. I'm interested in how you have looked into the construction of refugees and challenged the xenophobic and infantilizing portrayals both in the media, and I would suggest policy and academia. What path do you see or hope to build towards a discourse and policy platform that upholds human rights and dignity?
Well, thank you for your question. So the work that I do certainly tries to destabilize this dominant visual and discursive narrative that you see of migrants as being caravan invaders. But it's only a drop in the bucket, if you will, because I think it's something that I'm basically building on, but on social movements. that are so important and so vital. This moment of actually sharing to you that I have experienced the deportation rate and these families have been able to share that information to me, I think only arises as a result of social movements, right? Where youth who are enrolled in schools like this one, right, and others across the nation were brought to this country as infants and view themselves as American, right? Their first language is English, right? They've been raised in the cultural customs that are very familiar to us. We're in this room and virtually. And they've taken to the streets and gone to DC to really advocate for improved immigration measures, immigration legislation to legalize so many millions of people who remain undocumented to this day, right? So I actually would want to consider or ask you to think that social movements are very, very vital and important in actually shaping the research and vice versa. I think there's this ongoing conversation that motivates this effort to improve the lives of immigrants, not only in this nation, but also internationally, because we're seeing similar moves to unfortunately restrict entry of migrants, not only in the United States, but internationally. So this is a much broader conversation that not only involves the United States, but other places as well.
For sure.
Yes.
I have a question just about you're here at UB. Now, it's obvious the benefit to us in this campus of having you as a visiting scholar. What's been beneficial, or what have you gained from your work here so far?
Well, I've only been here for about a month or so. What has been beneficial? I would say just the ability to really have the protected time to work on this project. Most recently, my brother and I just opened just this past Friday an exhibit on the work that we've done with several of the individuals that we work to provide legalization. In Binghamton, we opened up an exhibit at the Rogerson Museum, the Science Center. So we opened up 14 images are the number of images that we have selected to be exhibited there. And what is unique about this exhibit compared to the previous ones that we've done is that it's the first time we're actually sharing the story of David. So we are connecting, this larger discussion about lack of legal status among stateless Maya in Mexico, but also connecting it to this larger conversation about family separation under zero tolerance that still persists to this day, actually. And that's really important to remember. That's something that I also have done during the time that I've been here at Buffalo. Just last week, exactly a week ago from today, several of my students and I presented work on a paper that we published in just May of last year on David, right? So I co-authored a peer-reviewed article with 4 of my research students, one of whom is now a doctoral student at CCPA and Binghamton University. And we just talked about the story of David, his connection to the impact of zero tolerance, the traumatic experiences in the long term. But then we connected it to the Biden administration and how he continues to utilize separate families under a different guise using the public health rule, right, under the pandemic, which was most recently employed toward Asian migrants who were right across the border, right? So we're connecting this conversation on how family separation that we're seeing here with the story of Indigenous Maya connects to the contemporary period as well. So that is just one example of what this opportunity how this opportunity has been helpful for me. And right now I'm just building on all this work to inform my manuscript titled Legacies of Forced Migration, which was the title of the exhibit that just recently opened up in Binghamton. And that is actually what I aim to also do here, to bring the exhibit at the start of next year. So that's the project that I wish to do, bring, if not 14, but more of the images because of space constraints in the venue that we just presented. We want to bring more of those photographs to also feature David's story and also provide an update, as I just did right now, you know, where is the status, what's the status of that, you know, the status of the reconnection of David's father to his son, you know, under humanitarian parole. Where will it be a few months from now? You know, hopefully I'll have an update once that exhibit, hopefully once it comes to fruition here, I can provide that information to you then.